Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guest today is Jeff Holland, who is the former director of the Annapolis Maritime Museum, having recently stepped down after a very noteworthy service to the museum, extraordinary work that he has done with the museum, and he's here today to talk a little bit about the museum and its experience and the accomplishments that he has had with the museum. So Jeff, welcome to Annapolis Mosaics.
Thank you, Michael. It's an honor to be here.
Well, why have a maritime museum?
Well, you would think that a place like Annapolis, America's sailing capital, ought to have had a maritime museum all along. But as it happens, the concept of the Annapolis Maritime Museum actually took some time to develop. A woman named Peg Wallace, who passed away just a few years ago, was very active in the community, very active in a number of different areas, including civil rights and women's rights. She had a bumper sticker that said, "Well-behaved women rarely make history," and she was a dynamo. So she volunteered me to help with what was then the Eastport Historical Committee. And this was an offshoot of the Eastport Civic Association, and it was basically Horn Point focused. But since most of the people who traditionally lived there since the end of the American Civil War had something to do with the water, watermen working out on the water, women and men working in places like McNasby's and Sadler's, processing seafood, working at the Naval Academy, we realized that there was a story to tell about Annapolis history and heritage that wasn't being told by any of the other organizations in town. Historic Annapolis Foundation has been doing a great job interpreting Annapolis in its colonial splendor and preserving the great pieces of architecture that are left over from that era. But the Naval Academy certainly does a brilliant job with interpreting the military aspect of our naval history. But what we realized is that nobody's telling the story of Annapolis from what we felt was the most important aspect, which is the waterside point of view. And so that's when we, through Peg Wallace's aegis, put together a focus study group, and about the year 2000, morphed from the Eastport Historical Committee, focused on just that little peninsula, to the Annapolis Maritime Museum. And that's about when I started becoming active and came on board as a very part-time director, and since then we've done amazing things, as you were saying.
Let's talk about some of those amazing things. The museum serves a community in a variety of ways, and I'm just going to give some examples and let you talk about it. And I'm going to start with one of the things that I think has given you a lot of attention, and that's your Experience Center and its signature exhibit, Oysters on a Half Shell.
Yes. Well, the building itself is the McNasby Oyster Company building, and it is the last vestige of a once thriving industry here in Annapolis. Nowadays, when we think of the bay and the watermen, we think of crabs, but that's only because there are only about 1% of the historic population of oysters that we used to have. But the McNasby building was active from about 1919 up until about 1986 as an oyster packing plant. Watermen would bring their harvest to the docks. Mr. McNasby would pay them. He would hire local kids to take wheelbarrows full of oysters from the docks into the building. Local men and women over time would stand on cold, wet floor for hours from 4 o'clock in the morning until noon, shucking tons and tons of oysters. And that was a big industry here. These oysters would be packed in cans and shipped all over the country, as far west as Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And so it seems logical that the first exhibit that we install into this building would be about oysters, about why oysters are so important to the health of the bay, but also about the cultural history and heritage of the people who made their living on oysters in that building.
Many of the things that programs that you have focus on children, and specifically children's educational activities via your education center. I'm just going to mention some of them, let you chat about each one of them. One I'll bring up is something called a 6th grade oyster partnership, and it's my understanding you've also introduced something very recently dealing with environmental literacy.
Exactly right, and we feel as though the Maritime Museums program is right on the cusp of this new movement. Just to give you a little background, the governor, actually going even to the federal level, the president has set the goal that every student in public schools should have some level of environmental literacy before they graduate. Here in Maryland, that's taken, our superintendent of our public schools has taken the lead there statewide. And so as using Anne Arundel County as the focal point for this new movement of encouraging environmental literacy. Here in our county, we are blessed to have a fabulous environmental center, Arlington Echo, and it's run by a gentleman by the name of Steve Berry, and we have worked together with Steve to develop programs specifically aimed at 6th grade students in our local area that combines both the natural history and the economic or the environmental issues that are influencing the bay, but also the cultural history and heritage of the people who live here. And it's our feeling that it's that interaction between people and the environment over time that really explains who we are and defines why we're here.
Okay. You also have something called maritime exploration.
Right. Now this is geared toward students who are in private schools or homeschooled or in groups throughout the area, like the Boys and Girls Club and the Box of Rain program.
Okay.
And this is not necessarily geared toward a specific school, but it's geared toward students who live within this area. And many of them are challenged in one way or another. And so, again, we are providing some of the same similar themes in our programs for the public schools, but for this broader audience.
Okay. And how about the Chesapeake Champions?
This is a real gem. This is one of our original programs that was started several years ago. And as a matter of fact, Heather Ersts, who is the curator for Historic Annapolis Foundation, was working with us at this time and developed this program in conjunction with the county schools. It is a program for students in the 2nd and 3rd grade in Title I schools throughout the city of Annapolis, and most of them are, to have an after-school program that is not just a field trip to the school, but an interactive program that lasts for several weeks at a time, that starts out in the classroom and then comes to the museum, and the kids go back to the classroom. Our staff go back to the classroom, the kids come back to the museum. And it combines not just these environmental literacy issues, but also some fun ways to explore those issues through the arts. The kids learn to write a song or a poem with Janie Maneely, who's one of our treasures of Chesapeake Bay music. They meet a real live waterman. John Van Alstyne brings his boat up from Shadyside, or from Galesville, and learn that the watermen are perhaps some of our best conservationists. He's right there to tell you that it's not in his best interest to go out and catch every crab in the bay this afternoon. He'd rather have a sustainable fishery. So by inspiring these kids to appreciate the Chesapeake Bay, we're hoping to build better stewardship. We've learned through all of these programs, from post and pre-tests, that we help improve their scholarship. But we also feel by helping them connect with the heritage and roots of this wonderful community helps build better citizenship as well.
How about Baybound?
Baybound is another program that is geared toward groups who might not otherwise have the opportunity to do this. This would be mainly toward the private schools in the area. We didn't want to exclude anybody from the possibility of having this fun experience.
Right. And I think you also offer programs for preschool kids too, don't you?
We do.
Get them started early.
That's right, and that's our whole point. This is a short program that we, our staff go to the schools and help kids understand the community that thrives within an oyster reef. Oyster reefs provide habitat for a number of different creatures, and to get to feel and touch and see all of those critters that you wouldn't normally see, and understand that each one of them has a role in keeping the bay healthy.
We're going to take a break now, but when we return, I'll be talking with Jeff Holland about some of the other ways in which the Annapolis Maritime Museum serves our community.
Hi, I'm Annapolis Mayor Josh Cohen, and I want to tell you about a new free way for you to enjoy downtown Annapolis. Our unique shops, our dining, our entertainment, and our historic maritime charm.
Did you know that Annapolis has a new circulator trolley that will shuttle you free from one end of the central business district to the other? Well, after parking at Knighton or Park Place Garage for just $5 a day, you can get on the circulator by simply raising your hand anywhere along the route and see what downtown Annapolis has to offer. For more information, go to annapolis.gov and click on circulator.
We're talking today with Jeff Holland, who just recently stepped down after a very long, successful tenure as the director of the Annapolis Maritime Museum. Jeff, the museum has served as a host for community events, lectures, concerts, and tours. Could you talk a little bit about some of the specifics of these? What has the museum done in this area? I know it's always busy. There's always something going on there. It's just a wonderful resource. I'm sure our viewers would really like to hear about some of the things that you've done.
Yeah, if you think about it, our whole concept from the very start was that we would create an active, hands-on, interactive community center where people come and share information and learn about our heritage and the ecology of the bay. We never meant it as a Smithsonian or one of those old-fashioned museums where you stand around with your hands in your pockets and you look at old stuff behind glass. There's nothing behind glass. Everything is touchable and readable and approachable. But what's most important is this gathering together of students, of people in the community, and visitors. And so even while the museum was closed due to the devastations of Hurricane Isabel from 2003 to 2008, really, we kept this programming going in order to keep the museum building and growing and engaging with the community and providing these services. Some are concerts. We have summertime concerts all summer long on Thursday evenings. We have a concert a month over the course of the winter. And all of these, even in our musical approach, is geared toward helping people appreciate the environment of the bay. So we have Chesapeake Bay singers and songwriters who are interpreting the history and heritage of other watersheds as well, from traditional sea chanties to very modern musical pieces, either very traditional or original. And so it goes along with the art exhibits that we hold there as well. There are constant art exhibits that change every 6 to 8 weeks, and these are also geared toward the environment in some way or the other, Chesapeake Bay or other waters. And again, using the visual arts to help our audience connect with the environment, just as we're using the performing arts. In addition to that, we have a winter lecture series that runs from January through March, 10 weeks this year, that run a whole range of concepts, from cooking to the history of the War of 1812, to the history of the Civil War. And these are authors and experts and people who have these incredible stories to share. And all of our programs, whether it's a lecture or a concert or an art exhibit, are geared toward people engaging together and having fun and learning and connecting. And that is what the whole concept of the museum has been from the very start.
You made brief reference to Hurricane Isabel in 2003. That was quite an encounter for the museum, but you bounced back nicely from it. Could you give us a sense of what actually happened, what the challenge you faced there was, and how you've managed to turn things around?
Yes, as it turns out, I think Peg Wallace was the first one to say, as we were standing there knee-deep in mud and debris everywhere, Peg said, "Look, you're going to find out that this is the best thing that ever happened to us." And I didn't believe it then, but I believe it now. Because before, we were a tiny, almost all volunteer organization trying to fill this great big 7,000 square foot building with exhibits and programs. We had very few visitors. We had 25 volunteers who would show up on occasion. But it was, and we had big plans, but it was hard to engage the community with these big plans that we had. Once the hurricane hit, the community came out in full support. When Buck Buchanan, who was then the chairman of the board, brought the board together and decided we were not going to let a little thing like a hurricane stop us, even though there were 8-foot tidal surges, there were waves crashing over the building, there were big holes in the building, the deck was ripped off its hinges and landed in the street next to the building. There were, and again, mud and debris everywhere. We had managed to save all of the important artifacts, but I found the next day couldn't get even 2 blocks away from the museum. And I was trying to see what the building was like back there down at the end of 2nd Street, and looked down, and there was the center drawer for my desk floating down the gutter. And I thought that's probably not a good sign. But again, people came out, volunteers showed up, people donated money, and we put together a plan to recreate the McNasby building. In fact, the whole campus, the little barge house, which is where the organization started in 1990, was renovated as an entire pro bono project by a local design company. And so in developing these plans with our local architect, Kirby Meyerhoff, we were trying to, the biggest, hardest part was, we're going to go out and raise $2.5 million for a building that's going to get hit again by a similar storm sometime in the next 100 years.
Almost certainly.
And so how are we going to address that? And by studying the National Park Service standards that they developed for Harper's Ferry, where their historic buildings get hit with floods every 10 years, Their solution was make the building submersible. And so as we restructured the building, we leveled off the floor, put storm, actually scuppers, storm vents in the side, and have all of the electrical up above the 100-year tide mark, 5 feet up on the floor. All the mechanical systems are in the ceiling, and all of the walls are the same concrete wallboard that's behind the tile in your tub enclosure, and everything is on wheels. So anything we've installed can be put aside or set in a truck and taken to high ground. The water can come in, goes back out, we mop back up and get back to work. And that has worked through storms and high tides and what would have been debacles ever since. But since we planned for it carefully, it's a nuisance but not a hazard.
Jeff, looking back on your tenure as director of the Annapolis Maritime Museum, what would you identify as your greatest accomplishments?
You know, that's hard to say because it's for a small organization, we've really accomplished a lot. I would say, first of all, the education program. Started out 4 years ago with 350 kids. We've had more than 5,000 kids through the doors so far up until this date. And those are students from Annapolis and surrounding Anne Arundel County, all of whom, some of whom had never been out on a boat before. But we developed a partnership with Watermark Cruises. They provide the boats so the kids can get out and see their community from the waterside point of view. I think it boils down to a comment that I heard from one of the moms who was coming along with a group from Eastport Elementary. And she was an African-American woman. We were talking about work boats, and her son was along. And she pulled me aside afterward and said, you know, Jeff, my grandfather went out on one of these boats every day, every winter, all his life, and I never knew what he did out there until now. And to help provide that connection with our maritime heritage is what I found most gratifying.
What do you see as the museum's greatest challenges looking ahead?
I think with any small organization these days, it's keeping the funding going, keeping the grants going to support all of these fabulous projects. And that can only be done through building community support and getting more people involved and contributing and donating both their time and talent as well as their treasure.
You mentioned grants. Where does most of the funding for the museum derive from?
Actually, the museum is has quite a long list of supporters. From the federal level, the Chesapeake Bay Gateways and Waterways Network, the NOAA has been a fabulous supporter of our education program. On the state level, the Maryland Heritage Areas Authority and the state government provided several bond bills to help reconstruct the building. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources helped us rebuild the docks. At the local level, we have regional grants from funders like the Chesapeake Bay Trust, who have been very supportive with our, specifically with our education program, Bank of America Foundation, a number of family foundations, and of course our board of directors are 100% involved with giving not only of their expertise but also financially, as well as about 350 members and other supporters who provide funding from a very local level.
Jeff, I'm sure that our viewers would like to learn more about the Annapolis Maritime Museum. How can they get that information? Do you have a telephone number and a website that you can share with us?
Yeah, the website is probably the easiest.
Okay.
It's amaritime.org and www.amaritime.org. And that has a listing of all of the current events. And now's the time to get interested in the winter lecture series. It's going to be going January through March, and lots of fabulous topics there that you can learn about, and you actually sign up online.
And it's just an annual thing that you do in
That's
terms
right.
of, it's
Yeah,
an
every-
annual thing, so every
winter.
year you have those, that winter program.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like to have more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, please jot down the information on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov. And you can check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on the icon reading Boards and Commissions, and scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters." Excellent, Jeff.
Thank you.
Excellent interview. I think our viewers will be most interested in this.